Hi, and welcome to this episode of Consciousness and Me. My name is Josephine, and this episode we will be talking about spirituality in a scientific age. For me, this is such a divine topic in a way, because I'm brought up in the south of Sweden. It's quite an atheistic society, and I've always been quite inclined down the science route. I've studied physics and mathematics and physiology and biology and a bunch of stuff. And that's where I tried to find most of the answers, but it felt like the more I learned, the less answers I got. It was like you learn a model, like say the atom, and then you go one step further down and you learn that actually that's not the most elemental particle. There's another layer, and that layer just kept unfolding. And then about 10 years ago, I started meditating, or meditation came into my life, and that brought me down the spiritual path, looking inwards, trying to understand what's actually looking out through my eyes. What is this thing about life? What's the purpose? How do I even comprehend being aware? And for a very long time, these two paths for me were quite diverge. I still had an interest in both of them, but it was like there was a friction inside, or division, because I couldn't really merge them. But in recent years, they have actually come together for me. Feeling that these two are not separate, they are the same path. Looking outward into science, it takes you to the same spot as looking inwards, meditating, exploring your own consciousness. And I think this is the route to go in our modern age. And actually, I don't think there's a need to separate spirituality and science. Because we, in our days, are so scientifically schooled. That's our way to explore the world. Using our rational minds, make experiments, observations. And at least from my upbringing, and potentially for a lot of you as well, that kind of excluded the spiritual path, because the common narrative is physicalism or materialism, meaning that the foundation of our world is based on some kind of material, we call it matter, that's built up, but when it becomes complex enough, such as our nervous system, then consciousness erupts out of that. So consciousness comes out of this thing called matter. And that makes matter primary. And the consciousness is just this little odd occurrence that happens in a few biological organisms. But the reality, the real stuff, it's out there, and we call it matter. And that a little bit discredits whatever we find on our inside. It becomes a bit irrelevant to understand the world. And it also makes it difficult to trust your own experiences. Because if you have been soaked in this narrative that there is an external world, that this is somehow proven knowledge, this is the only way it can possibly be, that there's matter on the outside, completely void of life, just this lifeless substance, and our internal world is the odd thing out. And it takes a lot to discredit the rational mind. But when we open up to the fact that there's another explanation, it's not given that our consciousness arises out of something called matter. There's an option. Non-duality, or in more scientific term or metaphysical terms, to be honest, analytical idealism is one of them. There are different kinds of explanation models, but basically the fundamental of that is that consciousness does not arise from matter. Consciousness is primary. There's the universal oneness, that something arises out of this thing called consciousness. And that means we don't have to discredit science. We can look inward. We can see what we are, bigger than our human manifestations, and still be totally in line with what science is showing us today. It's not one or the other, it's both. I think that's why I'm so enthusiastic about this topic. Because on the one hand, science can feel a bit external from myself. Like it's not really relevant for my life or the nitty-gritty details of being alive. But I've come to realize by observing my own journey that it has a profound impact in how I understand myself. Because if I believe that I am primarily a body and that consciousness is just arising out of that, that has an impact on how I view myself and how I view other people. So it's not so much a matter of learning something new. It's more about unlearning the narrative that we all took for granted. As if that's not something to be questioned. That matter comes first. But science is starting to show us that actually that model doesn't really hold true. One part of it is the hard problem of consciousness. Basically, how does consciousness arise out of matter? But also, if you go into quantum physics, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that's very hard to explain with physicalism. So maybe we've come to the end of the road with physicalism. It's been very useful as an explanation model, but it's not responsible for all the technological advancements we've done. It's not responsible for any progress in science per se. It's just been a useful model to explain what we see. But what we see doesn't really fit that model anymore. And on top of that, it's robbing us from our spiritual experience. And it puts a division where there needs not be any. So I guess one of the aims of this podcast is to broaden all of our perspectives, to make us question those things we take for granted. It's almost like we're at the edge of, once upon a time we thought that the world was the center of the universe, and that the sun rose in the east and set in the west, and it circled around the earth, and no one really questioned that because it was the narrative we'd been soaked in. But when we actually opened up to our experiences, when we listened to what experiments said, then we realized that actually our sense perception is fooling us a little bit. It may seem like the Earth is the center of the universe, but upon greater exploration, turns out that's not the case. And the same can be true for the way we see the world. I mean, it's easy to forgive the fact that we believe that there's something other on the outside and something than what's inside of me. Inside of me is something mental, and out there is something other, something substantial, something tangible. But we know that our sense perception, like our vision, is fooling us. Like, just take the example of looking in a mirror. Your sense perception, your vision, is telling you that there's a person in there. You can see a face, you can see a body, you can see facial expressions, you can see movements. All the things that would make you believe that there's another person there. And most babies believe that, or young children, the first time they interact with mirrors, they get a bit confused. But pretty soon we learn that even though our sense perceptions tells us that there's a person in there, we know by experience, by investigating, that that's not true. Our sense perceptions are there to guide us. They're not there to give us the absolute truth. We have to apply our wisdom to it. And maybe we're at the age where it's time to apply our vision, our wisdom on how we see the world. It might look like there's a world out there that's different from me, that my internal world is completely different from what I see outside. But if we apply wisdom, we can unfold that. And it's not about persuading anyone to think differently, to believe something new. It's the other way around. It's to look at our actual experiences, to apply our own rational thinking. And why would we do that? Well, for me, I guess we have our own reasons, but I'm pretty sure that all of us would like to invite more love, more happiness, more freedom, feeling like we belong in this world. So why apply a model that does the opposite of that, that makes us feel isolated, makes us feel lonely, makes us feel like we're odd and estranged from the surroundings of us. We're separate from other people. That our internal world is difficult for to be compared to what we see around us. And especially if it's not even the most likely way the things are built up. Mm. So that was a long that was a long and winding road. Spirituality in the scientific age. I guess it depends on what you mean with spirituality as well. I'd like to not have it completely coupled with religion, even though spirituality exists in the established religions. But there are also a lot of rules, a lot of structure, a lot of rigidity, organizations. So I think that spirituality is what transcends them, that exists outside of established religions and also inside of them. Spirituality is this exploration of our inner lives, of being intimate with ourselves, of exploring what we mean by ourselves. Going to that essence of us that isn't necessarily expressed in thoughts. The living experience of being alive, exploring life. So spirituality for me is not about believing anything. It's about being with what is. Being alive. Not being a thinking apparatus. Not being the narrative that my mind tells me. But to embody life fully, with curiosity. Will I stand by this exact description of spirituality all the time? Probably not. And the thing is that I think as soon as you define spirituality, you probably missed the part. I guess it's more about pointing in what directions we mean. For me, anyway, the purpose is not to make an absolute clear distinction. It's to enhance understanding. I mean, there's so much going on inside of me and inside of you. And the way we have to communicate is this rough thing called words. They're very, very limited in comparison to our inner worlds. But that's what we have to work with. That's the tool we have. We also have our body language, our facial expressions, tone of voice, art, music. But none of them can capture the full reality of ourselves. We just do as best as we can. I think that was all that wanted to be said in this episode. You're listening to Consciousness and Me, and my name is Josephine. Thank you for spending this moment with me.